Hello friends, how are you? Welcome to the show. It's Success Won't Come Calling. Simon Gibson here, checking in, reporting for duty. And I'm here in our fantastic studios waiting for my guest on this week's podcast, who is Sara Picken Brown. Sara is a former professional athlete. She was a bodybuilder and also a professional ballet dancer. Sara also now works as a coach. She works with other athletes. She works with TV presenters. She works with businesses who are all interested in improving their personal well-being or that of their team. Sara's got a fascinating career. She's traveled all over the world. She's originally from South Africa. She's now based here in the UK. I'm really looking forward to asking her about her career, about her plans for the future, and about lots more besides, particularly the time she was a burlesque dancer. Just wait for that, guys. So without further ado, sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of the podcast with me, Simon Gibson, and my guest this week, who is Sara Picken Brown. Excellent. Well, we're here with Sara Picken Brown. How are you, Sara?
I'm very good, thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. The pleasure is all mine.
Very warm here at the moment.
Well, the summer seems to be doing something, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty grim up north. You know, I know you've come up from London, so thank you for that. But yeah,
I brought it with me.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
And you brought something else with you as well, because we do guest rider on the podcast. What are we drinking today, Sara?
We are drinking a Macallan 12-year-old whiskey.
Now, when we were talking off camera, you're obviously something of a whiskey connoisseur, because you were telling me about the etiquette in terms of ice and any sort of mixer. So talk the listeners through.
I wouldn't say that I'm a connoisseur, but I'm certainly on a journey. That's for sure. With the ice, apparently, you don't want to mess with the wonderful blend or the quality of the whiskey. So you have whiskey rocks, and I believe they're granite. You put them in the freezer and they keep the whiskey cold, but they don't melt and then destroy the wonderful amber liquid that is in your glass.
Wow. Well, let me have a little taste of the amber liquid. Well, how it is taste, isn't it? It's one to be sipped, though, isn't it? You wouldn't want to go glugging this.
No, this is not a glugger at all. It is definitely to be savoured.
Yeah. Well, here's to you. Cheers. Thanks for coming up.
Cheers to you. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, you've got to tell the audience about where this accent is coming from. Now, I know that you were extremely well travelled. So, first of all, where were you born?
I was born in South Africa, and then have travelled quite a lot with my family. Spent a lot of time in New Zealand, and a little bit of time in the UK before I went to Australia, where I spent the last 17 years in Melbourne, in Australia. Yeah.
And now but now you're here in the UK. You're intended to stay put here.
Here permanently. You can't get rid of me. You've got me now.
So you've got such an interesting career in life. Where I'd like to start, if it's okay with you, is you started your career as an athlete in ballet and dance. Mm-hmm. What brought you to ballet in the first place?
Well, part of the reason that we travelled a lot as a family is because my parents were dancers. So they were both in the Pretoria Ballet Company in South Africa. So that's when I came along. My father was trained at the Royal Ballet School, so he was English. And that's where my parents met, was here in the UK before they both got jobs in a company in South Africa. So that's when I came along.
And obviously we'll move through the story in terms of your unbelievable progress, both in ballet and in other areas of performance and as an athlete. And then obviously your arrival into business in terms of helping others achieve their goals in terms of their physical goals, in terms of your work as a holistic wellness coach. But in terms of those early days when you were obviously with your parents and you first introduced to ballet, what was childhood like in terms of if your mum and dad were serious, or were they actually professional dancers?
Yep.
Okay, so what was
their job? Yep.
So they travelled a lot then.
Absolutely. I think by the time I was 3, I'd been around the world with them 6 or 7 times. So
Wow.
I spent an awful lot of time in hotel rooms and on aeroplanes as a child.
And what was their sort of routine then in terms of were they having to be very heavily committed to their own schedules in terms of ballet, and how did that affect the family in terms of how you lived?
Yeah, look, I mean, like any family, I think that there's scheduling of childcare and that kind of thing. I did have a nanny when I was very small in South Africa. This was a time when that was quite standard for a family to have that. So yeah, they would rehearse. They would have their schedule of performances and that kind of thing, and I was looked after and during the day and sometimes in the evenings, I guess, when they were performing. And absolutely adored my nanny. She used to make wonderful food for me, and that was a delicatessen type thing where it was called mouli. It was a South African thing, and you used to eat it with your hands. It was sort of like a rice based meal that was very sticky, and you used to eat that. And obviously, as a toddler, I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Having to eat with utensils was great.
Oh yeah.
So
every toddler does that anyway, don't they?
Yeah, this is true. So yeah, I don't really recall too much other than the occasional, well, probably quite consistent actually, going into rehearsals and being there and watching them dancing and sitting in backstage watching performances from the wings and when I was allowed to. So yeah, it was pretty magical really as a kid being in the theatre and seeing all of that.
I can well imagine. And obviously it also, I guess, allowed you to sort of become familiar with that sort of life as a ballet performer. What's your recollection of the first time you got involved yourself in ballet?
Oh, goodness. I harassed my mother to let me dance. She didn't want me to. So I was she held back until I was about 8 years old. Most little girls would start at about the age of 5, but she held back from letting me do any classes and things. And I just kept hounding her. So she gave up in the end. But yeah, the first performances were wonderful. I mean, it was all makeup and feathers and glittery things and every little girl's dream. You were, and the lights being on stage and having an audience there, and it was just wonderful, magic.
And how did your participation in ballet progress? Because obviously from those early days, you went on as the years progressed to be increasingly committed to the performances in ballet. How did that all proceed?
Well, I guess really during my schooling, I was part of a ballet school in New Zealand. I went through all of my what's called the syllabus that I did was called the Royal Academy of Dancing syllabus, so the RAD. And it's a system of training young dancers to be proficient to a professional level. And each year you do exams and have to be able to perform under exam scenarios. You have an examiner. There's usually only 1 or 2 of you in the room at the time. You have to know the steps that you're doing, so the choreography, and you have to be able to perform them proficiently to be able to pass and it's graded. It's a bit like martial arts. You go through gradings with your belts, different colored belts, and you have to be proficient at performing the syllabus. And that was exactly the same with the RAD syllabus. So all the way through, I passed all my exams to quite a high level, and did my final lot of exams in my last year of school, and then got accepted. I applied and got accepted into a course in Queensland in Australia, in Brisbane, at the age of 17, I believe I was. And I didn't do my final year of school because I wanted to go off and be a ballerina. So
wow, that's amazing.
So I state that I'm a high school dropout, but for a right reason. So yeah.
I was so interested then in your comparison between martial arts and ballet, because obviously I think when the majority of us who've never undertaken ballet think of it, we wouldn't automatically compare it to something like martial arts. But just talk to me about what are the comparisons, but also what are the what's the requirements to be a bigger, an efficient and a high performing ballerina? What do you have to develop? What do you have to sacrifice?
Yeah, look, I think that, I haven't been through any martial arts training, so I can't speak to it intimately, but certainly there are levels of discipline. There's, like any sport or anything where you require a level of physical proficiency, there is a repetitiveness to doing the movements and to executing with proficiency the physical components of it. Tiger Woods talks about how many times he had to hit a ball over and over again to get that neurological programming to the muscles, and it's exactly the same with dance. And starting at such a young age, you hone those neurological pathways very early on so that it becomes second nature. It just becomes the way you move rather than trying to do something maybe successfully, maybe not successfully. It just adds a whole level of proficient execution when you go to do the activity. And, going through it from a martial arts perspective, I guess, is there's discipline. There are hours and hours of putting the effort and work in. Sacrifice-wise, I think that, young people would probably rather be going, or some young people would rather be going out and hanging out with their friends, going to the movies, doing social things.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I knew what my goal was, and I knew that there was a level of work required to get there. And that meant, did I go to the movies with my friends on a Saturday afternoon, or did I practice? Did I rehearse for the role that I had received in the next show that I was in? And if I wanted to do it well and not mess up, then I had to make sure I knew my stuff and that I could execute my stuff every single time I went to do it. So that required a level of practice. Also, having said that, a lot of athletes understand how to manage their time because they've had to. So if you're putting hours in at the swimming pool or on the golf course or doing your martial arts, or for me as a dancer, you're doing things in the morning before school, you're doing things after school. And for me, I was sometimes spending 2 hours after school every night of the week in practice. Doing classes and rehearsing. And there was still the same level of schoolwork and homework that every other child in my class was having to do. So you become really, really good at managing your time, managing your energy levels, making sure that you're getting enough food in to be able to execute what you need to at a level of proficiency that produces excellence. And that's helped me in amazing stead through the course of my career. And I learnt that at a really young age. And it's something that I find sometimes quite challenging in a work environment when people don't know how to manage their time effectively, because I've been doing this since I was 8 years old. So, yeah, that can be challenging for me sometimes.
And I was interested in what you said about the neurological sort of programming element of ballet, because I think that issue of mental resilience and clarity is something which we'll definitely come back to, and not just in terms of your own career, but in terms of your work with clients now as a wellness coach. You mentioned, Sarah, that you had clarity on what your goal was during this time. So you're in Queensland. Obviously, you progressed in ballet to a certain point. What at that point was your goal?
My goal was to get into a ballet company. and my goal was to be a soloist in a ballet company. It's very hierarchical, and in ballet companies you start off, and this also relates to the amount of money that you earn as well. You start off at the core level where you're part of a number of dancers and you all do the same sort of work, and then you progress in the hierarchy to become a soloist. So you generally do the smaller, more what am I trying to say? Where you're actually sort of center stage, and the roles that you're playing are just yourself, or you're being partnered with your partner as a soloist. What they call pas de deux work. And then from there, after a number of years of being in a soloist level, and you've proven that you can hold an audience, you then get promoted to principal. And yeah.
So your goal effectively was that you progress above that, through up that hierarchy, and that you make this your career.
Absolutely, yeah.
And what happened next then? Because I know there was a point when injury started to appear and trouble you.
Yeah, look, it's something that had started when I was at school, and it was starting to show up and causing me a lot of pain. I had something called stress fractures on my shins, and it was impacting how I walked, let alone how I danced. How's the whiskey going?
You saw my face then, didn't you? Yeah, I'm not much of a whiskey. I mean, it's not bad to sip, but I think I had a little bit too much of that one. Don't worry.
That was awesome. Oh, dear. I didn't know whether it was my stress fractures or whether it was the whiskey. Clearly the whiskey. So I would have been about maybe 10, 12 years old, and it started to show up as being a potential problem. Got physio for it. It, as obviously body's growing and developing, my workload with the dance that I was doing was increasing as well. And also I wanted it to increase because I wanted to, I was keen, I was eager, I loved dancing, and so I wanted to do more, but my body probably wasn't really ready for it. When I did get to my college, if you like, my tertiary education with dance, it really started causing problems because, we were dancing for 8 hours a day, and it wasn't all intense 8 hours of work. We did have, lectures where we were sitting and listening to lectures. That wasn't a huge amount, though. It wasn't the usual university experience where you kind of sit there and potentially maybe even fall asleep through 2 hour long lectures. We got maybe 2 hours once a day, and the rest of it was physical activity. And yeah, my body did not like it and let me know. And
was it your legs, was it?
Yeah. My feet and my legs.
And is this a common injury for ballerinas?
Look, I think anything which is you're on your legs all the time and you're working them really hard, particularly for women, they do something called point work where they're on their toes. And yeah, there was many a time where you take your shoes off and they would be a bloody carnage. Sort of blisters that had become holes in your feet and that kind of thing. You look at dancers' feet generally and they're not works of art. They're quite ugly. And there's a reason for that because there's an awful lot of hard work and graft and wear and tear that goes into it. So, and I was no different. It's something that you accept. But for me, the injuries were causing some considerable problems. I did get treatment for it with physios. We had physios on site that were great, but it was fine because it was being managed. And then when I did come over to the UK to start the audition circuit as a dancer, particularly coming over, you go to all of the auditions that are in Europe, and you travel, and you've got to maintain your training, obviously, between all the auditions. So I was going into the Pineapple Centre in Covent Garden, and I was doing things at Danceworks. They have professional classes there where you pay as a professional to go in and maintain your practice. And unfortunately, I'm sure it's changed now, but certainly 20 odd years ago, they didn't have, in a couple of the studios, they didn't have sprung floors. So you were dancing on concrete, which bones and concrete don't mix very well. And I already had a pre-existing injury, and that pretty much floored me. So literally floored me. There was one morning where I woke up having done a few classes that week, and I couldn't walk. I actually had to crawl to the kitchen, bawling my eyes out because I was in so much agony. And
how old are you now?
How old am I now?
No, sorry, when this point happened.
I would have been 19, 20. So yeah, the realization that morning as I'm pouring my cornflakes out into my bowl, sitting on the floor because I couldn't stand, was that I didn't want to be doing this down the track. It just all hurt too much, really. And maybe as much as I loved dancing, it didn't love me.
But it still must have been a tough realization, bearing in mind that first of all you'd committed so much to developing your skills as a dancer, and secondly that you had this clarity in terms of your future. How did that sort of manifest itself in terms of what were your considerations when it dawned on you that perhaps the goals which you'd set yourselves and committed to for reasons outside of your control might just not be achievable?
The first thing that went through my head was I'm going to let people down. I think that was one of the major things. Not only was the dream not going to be realized, but that there'd been money invested in me, there'd been time invested in me, not only my own, but my family's as well, and that I was going to disappoint, and I didn't want to do that. So that was a really hard conversation with my family to have. But, in my own mind, I think as we all do, we sort of build up those conversations to be bigger and worse than they're actually going to be. So when it did actually happen and the conversation happened, the relief that I felt and the ability then to be able to move forward, make new goals, change direction. And that's something that at the age of 19, having to change direction was a challenge, but it's also an important life skill that I now realize some 20 odd years later, and having worked with as many people as I have, that you need to be able to adapt and overcome. You need to be able to change direction based on the facts that are in front of you, not what you hope could be or what you wish. And I had to learn that the hard way at 19. Yeah.
Well, I agree with you there entirely. And you expressed that very eloquently in that change is a constant, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You have to be prepared that firstly, things will never remain the same. And secondly, that your aspirations may, for reasons sometimes which you can control and sometimes which you can't, may just have to be reprogrammed and reset. How you mentioned new goals? What was the next chapter in your journey? What did you move on to after ballet?
Well, that having spent sort of from the age of 8 up until my early 20s, being so committed and so daily focused on being a ballerina, there was a 2-year period where I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. And, if I look back on it now, I think that I probably did suffer from a little bit of depression at the time, because suddenly the rug had been pulled out from underneath me. I had no foundation or grounding. I didn't really know what I wanted or where I was going, so I wasn't really myself, I don't think, for a good couple of years.
And did you seek any help during that period?
No, because it wasn't something that was really talked about. You just sort of got on with stuff. And I wasn't at home either. I was in London still, and, surviving in London without family and things around. You talk to family on the phone who were on the other side of the world, and they'd say, how's things? Oh, yeah, good. This is what I'm doing, da-da-da. But I don't really think I even knew what it was that I was feeling. I just felt a bit lost.
Yeah.
And it's the hindsight now, having experienced some life and the conversations that are happening now around mental health and awareness of mental health issues that I have more understanding of what perhaps I was going through at the time. But certainly at the age of 19, 20, I was like, oh, I just don't know what I want to do.
And how did you sort of get through that period to a point where you fixed your next goal?
I had a lot of conversations with people that I was close to, and family would have been one of the major ones, where, there was a couple of pro-con lists of, spending time writing pro-con lists about things that I might want to do or not want to do. And one of the key things that I noted was that I didn't want to sit behind a computer at a desk in an office, which funnily enough, I spend all my time in front of a computer now. But, I'm still moving, which is good. But yeah, I didn't want to be in an office. And I think I probably would have driven everyone insane and myself insane had I been in an office environment. So that was really clear for me. So then the options were, well, what do we do with that? And the fitness industry came up a number of times. Now, I wasn't particularly good at maths at school. I was really good at English, really good at history. Maths was not my thing. Neither was science, really. And one of the comments that in the sort of brainstorming conversation that I had with someone once was, well, you're not really that good at maths. Maybe going into the fitness industry isn't a good idea. And I was like, well, they do have calculators, and I get concepts. It's not that I'm, unable to understand concepts with science and that kind of thing. So, and I guess what I say to people from a coaching perspective is any negatives that come up, particularly if they come up from other people, is don't let that sway you in your decision-making process about things, because usually that's somebody else's judgments that has nothing to do with you. So that would be one of the key things that I'd always say. So yeah, I then found I'd gone back to Australia by that point and was living in Melbourne and found a really good course that at the time personal training courses were a diploma. They were 2 years, and so not 6 weeks or online. We had to actually be in the school room, if you like, in lectures and stuff, and working with bodies and moving limbs and around, looking how they worked and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I did. Went back, retrained at 22, and here we are.
That's interesting. And I know that aside from obviously this reskilling as a personal trainer, you also found bodybuilding. Is that right? How did that come about?
Well, so I'd finished my training and got a job in a gym. And one of the things that at the time in Australia, a lot of the people that were going into personal training, it's a relatively new industry at the time. And a lot of the people that were going into the industry had been usually guys who had been athletes. They'd been footballers. Now, when I say football, I mean Aussie rules football,
sure.
not soccer. Or they were involved with rugby. And they had gone to train. They'd done their sports science degrees, which, funnily enough, when I was doing my dance degree, they were the group that had to walk past our studios with the science and human movement guys in Brisbane at the university that I was at. And we always used to be like, oh, yeah, the sports people. And they always used to look at the dancers and be like, oh, gosh, they don't know anything, all this sort of stuff. It was a lot of sort of hierarchical sort of side
alpha
glancing.
male type stuff.
Yeah, a bit of side glancing going on.
Yeah.
So it kind of amused me that here I was in an industry where I had spent 2 years thumbing my nose at the sports people, and here I was now in the industry. So that was kind of funny. But a lot of these guys were coming out, and some women as well, but it was mainly a male-dominated thing, were my colleagues in the gym, and were talking all of this sciencey human movement, biomechanics, chemistry stuff, and I was like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I just know if you move that and you do that, you're going to lose weight, and if you eat that and you don't eat that, you'll feel better. And so that was how I worked with my clients. But I became quite aware that because I didn't have all of these pieces of paper, I needed to prove myself in another way. And most of the clients that I was working with understood that being a dancer was pretty tough graft, but I don't think they really understood to the same degree as if I'd been an athlete.
Yeah.
There wasn't the same level of recognition or anything. So I actually walked into a supplement store one day to get some supplements for a client of mine, and the manager of the store, a woman who started chatting to me, and she said, "Wow, you've got amazing legs." I was like, "Oh, thanks. That's really nice of you to say that." It was summer, and it was Australia, so it was pretty warm.
Yeah.
And, I was this fit personal trainer person, and so I was wearing shorts, and they were short shorts, and she had mentioned about my legs. I was like, "Okay, cool. Thanks very much. That's nice of you to say that." And she said, "Have you ever thought about getting on stage competing?" I was like, "What do you mean competing?" I didn't know what she was talking about. And I just heard get on stage. I was like, hell yeah, I want to get back on stage again. I miss it. So she said, "Look, let me show you." So she opened up one of these female fitness magazines, and she opened it to this page of these glamorous, gorgeous, Barbie doll looking American girls that were very heavily tanned. I have to say that was a bit much, but they had sparkly bikinis on and they just looked stunning.
And these were professional.
These were the pro
bodybuilders,
IFBB women, the figure girls. And I was like, wow, that looks kind of interesting. And what do they have to do? And they just look like they're models. And she said, "Well, no, they train really, really hard. Let me put you in contact with someone. You can ask your questions." And she did. And I went along to a couple of these shows just to see how they ran and what it was all about. And I remember thinking, I can do that. You don't have to remember any choreography. This is fine. Like, I'm in the gym every day anyway. You just have to, curb some of the things that you're eating or do this and that with your food, and I can do that. That's fine. And then get really tanned up and put on a sparkly bikini. I can do that. And so naively, I started the process under some guidance. I did have guidance through the process, and it was 8 weeks, 10 weeks from making that decision to actually stepping on stage, which isn't really that long time. And I won. And I then also won a couple of other categories on that day. So in a whirlwind, I'd gone from never knowing this thing actually was something you could do to
being a champion,
pretty much cleaning up. So that was all kind of exciting.
Well, this is, I think, a great point to take a break. So because you've got to the point now where you not only have identified your next goal, but you've actually started to deliver it. So we're going to take a breath, guys. It's half time. My recommendation is coming up. Stick with us. We're back with Sarah, the other side of half time. We're going to be talking bodybuilding, and we're going to be talking Sarah's current role working with clients on their well-being, and of course her plans for the future. So stick with us. See the other side of half time. It's half time, friends. My recommendation this week is for Keto Huel. That's Huel. It's going to be on our socials. It's a breakfast cereal for people who are on a low carb diet. I really struggle when I'm following low carb in terms of I do miss a bowl of cereal. I enjoy porridge, I enjoy a number of other cereals, and Keto Huel tastes as good but it's got much lower carbs in it. I've had to order mine, but if you're into cereal but you want to eat low carb, then it is worth ordering in. Reminder, guys, these recommendations, they're not paying me for these. I just recommend because I enjoy the products and I really enjoy talking to you as well. So that's Keto Huel this week. And now it's back to the podcast with Sarah. And we're back with Sara Picken Brown. Thank you again for doing this, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. How's the whiskey going down? You haven't touched yours yet.
Well, I want to make sure that I maintain my equilibrium for this interview, I think.
Well, I've never failed to finish. We've had all sorts of drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, on the podcast, but I've never failed to finish one yet. But I think you've given me my biggest challenge thus far. Stacey will have it at the end if I don't. So we left off when you'd just begun your career as a bodybuilder, and where you'd actually started to win things. Now, obviously, you were already in this space, if you like. You were already a coach. You were already working in the gym every day. From a training perspective, what changed? What had to change in terms of you becoming equipped to compete as a bodybuilder?
The intensity and the amount of weight that I was lifting. The principles of training are the same for strength training, whether you're a mum doing a couple of sessions a week. The way that you train essentially should be the same. However, I was training for 3 hours a day.
And that was pure lifting weights.
Yeah, pretty well. Depending on the time, how far out I was from a show, and bearing in mind that at the peak of my career, I was doing 5 shows a year. I was pretty much on a diet most of the time. And when I say dieting, my food plan was a cyclical process where certain things would be taken in or taken out depending on where I was in my program of training. I would go through strength and power phases with my training. So the type of work that I was doing, the rep ranges that I was doing, the amount of weight that I was lifting would be very specific, and then it would change so that I was working different muscle fibers, more endurance muscle fibers, and the number of reps that I would be doing would go from maybe 4 to 6 up to sort of 20 to 30. So working the body in a very different way, working different energy systems, mainly so that not only were you getting gains, but you were not getting injured. And having been through the whole process of injury, I was very critically aware that I did not want to get injured. And, to my credit, but also to the people that I worked with, because I did engage some key people within the industry who had coached pros within the Australian scene, who guided me really well. And I listened. I knew my body well enough to know what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. I didn't get injured through a 10-year career. I'm really proud to say. So
that's quite some feat.
Yeah.
It was interesting what you're saying about the reps. I was working on the assumption that because by definition you're wanting to build muscle, I was thinking that you would always be lifting weights with a view to failing. So you're pushing yourself to the point where the particular muscle just can't lift anymore to give it the opportunity to repair and grow. But from what you were saying there, upping your reps to sort of 20, 30 at certain stages of your training, that sounds like I'm not right on that.
Well, I mean, you're depending on the phase of the training that you're in, you're either looking to burn a lot of body fat or you're looking to grow lean muscle tissue. Now, a lot of people think that, you can only grow muscle or you can only burn fat. Well, that's actually incorrect. You do both. However, depending on what you're trying to achieve at which phase of the training that you're in and how far out from a show you are, depending on your food as well, it all works together holistically so that you're preventing injury, you're getting the maximum output. Yes, you do want to go to failure, but failure for what purpose? Is it to grow lean muscle tissue or is it to burn body fat? And when you're doing higher rep ranges, you're getting into different muscle fiber types. You're getting more into endurance muscle fiber types as opposed to your fast twitch or power-based muscle fiber types. So
I've got you. And in terms of your training, on any particular day, would you work one body part? So would you have like a leg day, or would it be more of a circuit?
The further out from the show that you were or I was, I would break it down to one body part a day. Absolutely. As I got closer to the show and my calorie intake reduced, I was about preserving muscle that I had gained and about burning as much body fat as I could. and also about managing my nervous system so that I didn't get injured. And also managing joint care as well and joint health, because as you start to reduce your calories, your exposure to getting injured, particularly with your joints, is more. Then it would go into more what I call functional training. So you're working multiple joints, multiple body parts to a cardiovascular level as well. So you're actually getting a cardio component in there too. And I challenge anyone to come and have a training session with me. And I can tell you all about functional training.
I mean, just to get, I was thinking I wouldn't like to go training with you. What, when you were kind of at your pinnacle as a bodybuilder, what were you chest pressing in terms of weight?
Oh, you didn't ask me that. Come on, Simon. Come on. You know, it was one of the things, anytime I went out, for the very few occasions, if I did go out to a bar or a club or something, and clearly I was training, you would look at me and, 4% body fat, and I'm only 5 foot, so I'm tiny, but clearly a fair amount of muscle on my frame. And I always get guys coming up to me saying,
"Oh, is that a chat up line?"
Yeah,
I mean, that wasn't my. I just want to clarify. I didn't know that was like a bodybuilding. Do you come here often?
Yeah, pretty much. No, you're fine. You're fine. Gosh. I think at the very peak, my max, and this was with help as well. Like I was being spotted, obviously.
Yeah.
I think I did do a 1 rep max of 100 kilos.
Good Lord, I need a swig of whiskey there.
And my squat was 110. So,
Blimey, that's a lot.
I don't do that now. Just to clarify, there is absolutely no way I do that now, but at the very peak of things, yeah.
And just, you mentioned your diet earlier in the way you went on this sort of cycle. When you were looking to build that lean muscle tissue that you described, what did your diet look like during those periods?
I always ate what's termed as clean. So I still, to this day, don't eat sugar. I enjoy a couple of glasses of wine. That's about my sugar intake. But my fruit intake's relatively low from the fructose perspective. So sugar's never been that high on the priority list because of its inflammatory issues. For me, I always stayed pretty low on carbs. And the types of carbs I was very specific about. So I didn't really have too much of oats and that kind of thing. It was always be rice, basmati rice, not white rice, because of the glycemic index difference. A lot of sweet potato. And there would be specific days that I would have that depending on what I was training as well. Quite high on the protein intake. Lots of green leafy veg. Pretty boring diet by most general standards, but it got me through. I was never really that concerned about having, massive amounts of variety, other than the variety of my protein intake for gut health needed to be that I was having fish and I was having white meat and I was having red meat to a certain point. As I got closer to events, the red meat would have to cut out because it was too high in fat. And to the point where chicken would get cut out, it would be replaced with turkey because it was lower fat intake in turkey. And then it would go down to white fish. So, it would vary through the course of a few weeks.
That's really interesting. I flirted with the keto diet over the last year. I'm not a big carb lover anyway, so I don't really like rice or pasta. I can take or leave bread. I don't really like potatoes. I'll have the odd French fries, unfortunately. But I've found it that when I stick to it, that from a pure fat loss perspective, it's effective. I also was doing, in fact, I'm still doing intermittent fasting. So I don't usually eat till sort of lunchtime. I just wondered, do you have any views on things like keto or modified Atkins and how it combines with fasting, or do you view it as a bit of a fad?
I'm not a great fan of the fasting concept. And there's a couple of reasons for that. If I was to talk to a client who was not an athlete and they are living your general day-to-day life, they do a training session 3 times a week, they might go for a walk a day or maybe a run. Generally speaking, I don't think people eat enough at the right times. And I think what they do is they binge. And so they have too much in one sitting. And it's usually at the end of the day, because by the time all of the stress from their day-to-day life has subsided and the adrenaline has started to dissipate from their bloodstream, they suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm starving.
Yeah.
And so they eat the wrong things at the wrong time, which is what causes a lot of the problems with fat gain. I have personally, when I was during my athletic career and also even when I was dancing, I'm not someone who can just not eat. I would have been the worst anorexic dancer ever because, I love food and I function really well with food like most people do. So, not having any food before you exercise was never something that I did all the way through my entire bodybuilding career. Everybody would say, oh, you need to have fasted cardio in the morning. You need to go for a walk having had no food. No, I never did that.
No.
Never did it, because part of the reason is that you need to stimulate your digestive system and you need to stimulate the sparking of the muscle fibers with glycogen, which can come from protein. It's easier converted when it comes from carbohydrates, but if you're not putting any carbs in your system, the next source of that spark is going to be from protein, which gets converted to glycogen. So your body then starts to metabolically rev up and you turn your engine on. It's like putting a key in the ignition of your car. You turn that engine on, you start burning fat. If you don't ignite the muscle with food, you then start to go into a starvation deficit
Yeah, that's where your body keeps hold of the fat.
And it holds on to everything. And I think for women specifically, we have, because of the hormonal balances being so delicate, you need to, and we are fat storing machines. Women are, compared to men. We're just built that way. So we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we support the body to burn as much fat as possible. There are some men, I'm sure, because their testosterone levels are a lot higher, they've got more muscle mass. Sure, having fasted cardio in the morning or doing some form of exercise where you haven't eaten anything, even if it's not all the time, but, you maybe miss a meal, you're probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
But for women, it's a much finer balance, and you have to be really, really consistent and on it when it comes to making sure that you're supporting fat burning. So for me, it was always, even if it was something small, half a banana or a hard-boiled egg or something like that just in the morning. Just
get yourself
get
kick-started.
Something in there, yeah. And then you can actually work harder for longer and get the benefits of that post-exercise fat metabolization, which is what it's all about.
It is.
So that's my thoughts on it. I'm not really a fan of the whole fasted intermittent fasting, mainly because at the end of the day, what you're doing is just cutting calories.
Yes.
And putting a snazzy, trendy label on it.
I think the theory is that your body, as long as you can, because when I do it, I don't cut calories. I eat the same amount of calories as I would in a full day, but within an 8-hour window. And when I've heard people talk about this, the theory at least is that your body becomes more efficient in terms of burning those calories. It doesn't go into starvation mode because it's still getting the calories, but it burns them faster. I'm not explaining that very scientifically. Is there anything there, do you think?
Look, to me, having regular intakes of food where you're making sure that the quality of the nutrients is correct, that you're not just getting calories from anywhere, because this is the other thing too. Calories are not all equal.
No.
As we know. So you need to make sure that the calories are what I call clean calories. And if you're having them every 4 hours, which is the way that the body actually processes food, that's the best place to be. Now, we're not all athletes and can go and just run out of a meeting that's maybe lasting. I know some of my clients have meetings that last for 4 or 5 hours. How they do it, I don't know. But you need to eat something in that time because it cuts through the window of when you should probably be having your next meal. And I think that the intermittent fasting is an answer to the lifestyle that we lead.
Yeah.
Given that, we are in offices and we're sitting for long periods of time and that kind of thing. I think that that's what it really is about is managing calorie management in the lifestyle that we lead. I still don't agree with that.
Rather than it being for sort of the sake of premium health per se, it's more of a lifestyle management issue. I completely get that.
And you know what? Let's change the conversations in workplaces. Make it okay to have clean food in the middle of a meeting because it keeps people fueled and functioning mentally, rather than putting a whole tray of sandwiches out and
binging on them.
And it's more about changing the culture of the workplace rather than changing how we process food, because we're never going to win that one.
Well, I want to come to this because I know you've done a lot of this work with businesses on these sort of culture changes and bringing good health to the workforce. So I want to come to that. But before we come to what you do now and your business now, I noticed burlesque in my research. Now, you've done ballet, you've been a bodybuilder, and the third B is burlesque. What is burlesque?
It is a form of dance that usually occurs in speakeasies where there is booze and usually comedy, and sometimes it's a bit tawdry and a bit naughty, but it's good fun.
And were you a burlesque dancer then?
I was, for a very short period of time, yes.
And are you able to talk about? I mean, I'm interested in this tawdry business. I mean, that's what we're all about on this podcast. Are you able to tell us kind of what life was like as a burlesque dancer?
Well, it was something that I did for about a period of 3 years, and Melbourne is, I believe, is the capital pretty much of the burlesque scene. Other than, at Los Angeles, there are a number of burlesque dancers that are world renowned, Dita Von Teese being probably the most well known. London does have a number of burlesque performers and festivals. There's all sorts of festivals that go on as well within the burlesque community. But for me, I wanted to get back on stage. I also was working with a lot of women with dance as well as with the fitness side of training, and burlesque became very popular in Melbourne, whilst I was in Australia. And so I decided to look into it and realize that teaching women burlesque was a wonderful way of getting them connected to their femininity and to their confidence, as well as having a really good giggle. There were a lot of hens parties that will have a burlesque dancer perform, but also teach them the moves. And burlesque is an old form of striptease, basically. Right. So it's not striptease as we know it today. There are no poles involved, but it was something that was done during the 1950s and earlier than that as well. I think it came to be in the 1920s and 30s, and when alcohol was banned and it went underground, I think it became quite popular.
Yeah.
They went hand in hand. So, yeah.
Fair enough. So, I mean, you've done just about everything so far. And burlesque, I suppose, is just pushing the boundaries a bit further.
Well, yeah, it started out as being interested in being back on stage and doing something different and being challenged. But what it ended up being was that I actually moved off stage and began producing shows. And so I would engage the talent, having known quite a lot of the performers within the Melbourne scene. I thankfully and wonderfully got a network of musicians that I knew and comedians as well. So it was a great way of networking and meeting interesting people. And so I would put on shows at nightclubs. And when I say nightclubs, I mean like bars that had kitchens associated with them as well. So I would set up the menu. We would have a themed drink for the evening, depending on what the show theme was.
Sure.
And so it would be at a dinner and a show at an affordable level that was a bit of fun, and that you got comedy, you got music, you got all sorts of entertainment for the evening. And I really enjoyed doing that. So, yeah.
And I think this is a nice sort of segue into what you do now, because I mean, part of what you do now is event building and event management. So I guess now let's move forward to where you are now. So first of all, tell us what a holistic well-being coach is.
So a client will come to me usually with a desire to manage pain or to lose body fat, or they're just really stressed out and they know that they need to put some more attention on their health and well-being, but they're not really that sure how to do it. And so they will come to me. We will sit down and we'll talk about the lay of their lifestyle land, if you like, and just look at how they're managing their time, what the issues are that are popping up for them. And then together we sit down and we put a strategy in place that starts to reverse, change, shift any of the challenges that they're facing. And, sometimes we address belief systems that are holding them back. We look at their relationship to food. We look at their relationship to work and stress. And particularly for a lot of women, they have to really have a hard look in the mirror around I need to be everything to everyone and I need to do 1,000,000 hours of work and never actually put back into me. That whole belief system often gets challenged. So yeah, we then, with clients, we'll actually go through a process of setting up an exercise program that works for them. If they are dealing with pain, we look at how we manage that. And they can either manage that through an exercise program that I give them, or if they need to be referred on to an osteo or a physio to work on very specific issues. So if they've got, things aren't aligned or they've got deeper concerns going on that I can help them with, then I will refer them and work together with the other practitioner. And yeah, we have check-ins on a program basis. So it'll either be once a week or twice a week, where we have either a talk consultation, so coaching, counseling session, depending on what the issues are that they're dealing with. And then we'll have a physical training session as well.
And is that gym-based?
Well,
obviously COVID has got in the way.
No, It's not been, but generally, usually if somebody's coming to me and it's around stress, I won't be putting them in the gym first off. I will do either a meditation program with them. We'll start looking at any challenges they have at being able to sit still, which most people have. Look at their breathing techniques, teach them how to breathe effectively, teach them strategies about how to deal with stress through breath. And then from there, we start to look at gentle movement. So yoga that starts to build an intensity. So we'll start with a gentle stretch program that will then move into more of a power yoga-based focus, and couple that with either getting outside and going for a walk on a program basis. So every morning at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., you have to do 20 minutes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or doing functional training session with them. So during COVID times anyway, the last 15 months, it's been from Amazon, get yourself a couple of dumbbells, up to 5 kilos, and this is the program that we'll do with these weights. And so I will teach them that. Usually at the moment it's been on video. I'll do the session with them. They follow what I'm doing. I can coach them through the online portal. Any technique issues, that kind of thing we'll look at. If they're not doing the movement really effectively, I can coach them through that as well. And then once they've got that basis and that foundation, they're then given the program to do that themselves. If they want to continue training with me, then obviously, yes, we can keep doing that. But really my whole focus for people is that they have the skills and the tools and are empowered enough to go and do it themselves, because that's then sustainable. Yeah. And it's all about sustainability. My whole thing's always been, if I'm still teaching you in 10 years' time, and it's not because you're not able to do it yourself, it's just that you really like hanging out with me, and so you've kept me on, which is great. And that has been the case with a number of clients of mine. I've trained them for 10 years, and, I will say then becomes our training together. We become almost like training buddies, because it's like, you know what to do. You don't need me here to teach you. But we just have a chat and they check in and becomes friendly and fun.
And you mentioned to me off camera that what's happened increasingly is that you've been approached by businesses, corporates who want to bring this holistic wellness to their teams. Talk to me about that. How did that start, and what's the brief you're given by corporates when they approach you?
Yeah, look, I think workplace wellness is something that has been growing for the last 10 years or so. And I think more and more companies, particularly during COVID times as well, are beginning to realize that they have to have something for their staff that supports mental and physical well-being and stress management levels, because people are working harder. And certainly during COVID times, the statistics are showing that people are at home, they are putting more in, they are producing more,
Yes,
being at home. And that never used to be the way. I think a lot of businesses thought that they'd be less productive because they'd have more distractions, but actually it's proven to be quite the reverse. With that inability to actually switch off, stress levels have gone through the roof, put COVID and all the rest of it into the mix as well, and it's become a mental health minefield. So, businesses realize that having staff or giving staff the opportunity to switch off, to establish relationships within the team that are not work-based, produces better communication, it produces better relationships, it produces overall more work, and the quality of work improves as well. And so, organizations will come to me either wanting to have stress management workshops, or they'll want to have nutrition-based workshops, so how to eat to be more effective and how to reduce stress and be healthier. And also mindfulness meditation workshops as well as the physical training. Going in and doing Pilates a couple of times a week, or bar class, which is a dance-based thing, and the standard yoga within the workplace is quite popular as well. So it's really good to see that in the last period that organizations are really taking that on.
It is encouraging, isn't it? Because if you think about it, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but you spend such a lot of your time at work. And if wellness and well-being is not part of the third of your day that you spend at work, then it is an issue, isn't it? And it's encouraging to hear that you're being approached by more companies who share that view. We're going to put your website on our socials, and companies who want to talk that through with you, just give you a shout.
Absolutely. And also, there are a lot of companies that perhaps don't want to do ongoing programs, but certainly want to have an event or a one-off, which I also do a lot of as well.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, because these events that you manage, they're within your area of expertise. They're in wellness. Tell me about what these events are and why you arrange them, and what your plans are for the future with them.
Well, the event consulting and event management side of things is basically a combination of maybe the last 10 years of me organizing clients and organizing charity events that I've done in the past, and fundraisers and that kind of thing. I've done sporadically, but now I'm realizing that there's actually more scope for that kind of thing, and organizations, whether it's individuals who want to bring something to their business, or whether it's even events like hens parties, where they don't want to just go out and drink. They actually want to do something meaningful that's memorable. They'll have a healthy, wellness-oriented function or event that they do. So it's not just corporate organizations, obviously.
It's just groups.
It's just groups, really, yeah. I have a network of amazing professionals, fitness professionals in every single area of expertise that you could possibly think of, who I can contact and engage with to keynote speak at events. There's also the organizational side of things, getting all the logistics in for, making sure that systems, PA systems, all that sort of thing are available. Musicians as well, if that's required. I have access to those sorts of people too. And then making sure that the themes and the topics are actually aligned with what the organization wants, and that the right people are in the right place at the right time doing the thing that they need to be doing.
Yeah.
And that everyone's happy at the end of the day.
Well, it sounds like they certainly are. I can see that being a growing area. Well, I can't believe we're nearly at the end of our discussion. I mean, there's such a lot I could have spent that full hour talking to you about, Sarah. I really do mean that. And I mean, you've shown over your career an incredible ability to change, to embrace diversity and flexibility. You've shown incredible courage to get through the injury that you suffered early on. But I wanted to just finish with the question which I ask all of my guests, which is, what does success mean to you?
Good question. Success means to me being able to move with flow through whatever hurdles come up. I guess a lot of people see success as achieving the goal, and I've achieved the goal, but the goals change.
Sure.
And what to me success is being able to navigate all of the things that will come up, and there's always problems that come up, but can you do the navigation with grace, or do you fall apart? Do you have a resilience mindset, or is it that it's catastrophe every 5 minutes? Success really for me is being able to adapt, overcome, and keep resetting where you're headed based on the lay of the land and the facts that are in front of you, and not wishing and hoping. There is a little bit of being able to dream. Dreaming is very much a part of setting goals and achieving them, because you have to be able to conceptualize where it is that you're going. You have to have that creative element. But if you can't move with that creativity based on the facts that are on the ground, then you're never going to get there. So, and you're going to get disheartened very quickly, because there's going to be hurdles that come up all the time. It's just life.
It is. It is. That is right. But it was a beautiful answer, and I'm certainly not been disheartened by our conversation. It's been absolutely inspirational, Sarah. It really has. Thank you so much.
And thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. It's been all ours. So we'd love to see you back in the studio at some point in the future. Very best of luck with all of the exciting things you've got in your plan. And in the meantime, should we say thank you to Sara Picken Brown?
Thank you very much.
So Sarah was a great guest, wasn't she?
She was so interesting, wasn't she? I mean, like I said, she's done such a lot. She's travelled such a lot. She's changed such a lot in terms of her careers, in terms of the different things she's done. I think I could have spent a full podcast episode talking about any one of the chapters in Sarah's life. I mean, if you just look at the bodybuilding years, for one, it was so interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, she was great, and she was a top guest.
Yeah, she's very intelligent. Like, I think it was really interesting listening to a bit of the science behind things and stuff like that as well. It was like, you don't always get to hear things like that, do you? So it was very interesting. And as you say, the bodybuilding stuff, I was like, she's only tiny as well. So I can't believe you used, unintentionally, may I add, a chattel plan and asking her how much she bench pressed. I feel ashamed for you.
Well, I've never chatted up a bodybuilder before, so it was an innocent question, but I did make it clear. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting you said about the science stage, because what I want to do on the podcast is our audience are intelligent, and they want to know detail. They want to understand issues. They want to learn new things, because that's why I started this podcast, because I wanted to learn more. So when we got stuck into the nutrition side of bodybuilding and the training aspects, I really enjoyed that part, and I wish we'd have had more time just to dwell on that a bit longer. And it's something which we'll keep returning to in the podcast. And what I want to do is I want to give everyone the opportunity to learn more in the same way I've been given this opportunity.
Oh, definitely, especially when it comes to diet, exercise, nutrition, things like that. It's just, things that are going to help you even on your successful journeys. Obviously, you've got to look after yourself, haven't you?
Well, it's a common theme, isn't it? Because it's one of the few things which is in your control. Certain things can happen in life that you just can't do anything about, like, blooming COVID. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do, and we all probably need to do more of it, is just look after yourself more, is to watch what you eat, is to work out, and is to approach all of those areas really positively.
And to drink less. Drink less whiskey.
I'm drinking less whiskey. I hardly touched it.
Oh, anyway. I don't know how you've done that.
So it's the first one I haven't finished.
I know. I mean, I smelt it. It was potent. And if I can't drink it, that says a lot.
It certainly does. Oh, guys, that was a fantastic episode of the podcast. Thank you so much to my guest, who is Sara Picken Brown. Hope you're all well. Have a great week. We're here every Wednesday with a new episode on Success Won't Come Calling, which is the podcast for people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today. And that's it from me and Stace.
Bye.